it's Jessie. Today I am drinking goji green tea from the local tea company. Alright, so today is going to be a bit of a mashup video. My December wrap up, and then we'll get into my stats for 2020 because I haven't done a full stats video yet. So I finished 12 total books in December with an average rating of 3.7. That includes 2 books I didn't rate, and I'll talk about that in a minute. There was an average of 331 pages in these books, and I read an average of like 128 pages per day. So 2 of those books I didn't rate. One I will talk to you about at the end of this video, and then the other one was a DNF. I DNF'd Less by Andrew Sean Greer. Honestly, I couldn't even tell you what it was about. It just bored me and I gave up. I just didn't have any desire to finish reading a book that wasn't keeping me remotely interested. So moving on from that, I read Within the Sanctuary of Wings, which is the final book from Lady Trent series. Again, we'll get a full review of that hopefully within the next month or 2. This was probably my least favorite of the series. I think it was a fantastic end, but there's some things that happened in this that I didn't like. And I don't want to talk about it because it's very big spoilers, but just wasn't my cup of tea, as it were. I read Politically Correct Holiday Stories and Lightning for my ongoing project. I don't really want to talk about either one of those. Politically Correct Holiday Stories was fine, and Lightning actually terrified me. Like, straight up scared the bejeebus out of me in a way that no horror book I've ever read has come close to doing. So I think that's a win for that. I don't think that's what that book was trying to do. I also continued with The Last Dragon Chronicles. The next one on that is the Fire Eternal. Honestly, like I've said before, these just get weirder every book, and I like them all individually, but as a series it's weird. So anyway, moving on to the rest of the books, we're going to be skipping straight on down to 3 stars. I read The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This has gotten a lot of hype this year, so if you haven't already heard of it, where have you been? But this is a book about Tao, who joins the military for the purpose of revenge. It's in the description. I hate saying that because it feels like a spoiler, but he joins the military in order to get stronger and be in a position where he can enact the revenge that he wants to. This was interesting. I read it as part of Ridima's Discord server. It was their buddy read. It was fun to read along with people. I didn't like the beginning. So the prologue, amazing. Catches you right away. Super into it. Then the next like 3 chapters, I hated it. I was like, oh no, I'm gonna hate this book. I don't know why I'm into it. And then from then on, it got way better. I fall in the middle of the road, which I think is a little rare for this book. People tend to either love it or hate it, and I think entirely that's based on whether or not they like Tao, the main character. I didn't really care for Tao. I think the story was good in spite of him, not because of him. But yeah, I just wanted more from other things. There was like, every once in a while there was a point of view for another character. I wish it had been split point of view between him and Shuri. I wish it had been split between the 2 of them, because honestly I was more interested in what was happening to her, and instead she ended up being kind of like info dump machine, and I did not like that. So iffy there. I think it's good. I'm really excited to get into Fire of Vengeance though, because a lot of the problems I had with Rage of Dragons, I've been told Fires of Vengeance addresses. So, and then the other 3-star was In the Vanisher's Palace by Aliette de Bodard, I think. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling that was really well done. Like, it was subtly done. I forget why I even added this for my TBR, because I didn't remember it was a Beauty and the Beast retelling when I picked it up. And honestly, until 2/3 of the way through the story, I had no idea that's what it was. But it's about this world with, there's dragons, and there used to be these creatures called vanishers who were kind of cruel and evil, and you were kind of told to avoid them. You know, in retrospect though, I don't have that much to say about it, which is interesting. The one thing I did like about it was the relationship between to give you a little more information about it, is this woman ends up being taken by a dragon to be tutor or governess or teacher to her 2 adopted children. I liked the relationship there, but I'm really struggling now in retrospect to remember much of what happened in the book beyond just the typical story beats of Beauty and the Beast. So that's maybe not the most glowing review for it, but I did enjoy it, and I thought the world was really interesting and engaging. I just don't know that the story was. From there, I had 3 4-star reads. The first of these was Mort by Terry Pratchett. So I've read Terry Pratchett before. I had read the first 3 books of the Tiffany Aching series, which I thought was only 3 books, but I guess there's a 4th one now, when I was younger, and I loved them. I've been told that actual Discworld fans will hate my opinion because I thought they were absolutely delightful and I loved every minute of them. But I never really read any more from Discworld. I also read Good Omens last year. And I watched, I'll link it down in the description, but I watched Library of Alexandria has a why you should read or how you read Discworld video. And one of the starting places he suggests is more if you just want to read the Death series. And I had started this in the hopes that maybe I would get through all of them to get to Hogfather in time for Christmas, because Hogfather is like their Christmas book, which I obviously didn't, because I didn't finish Mort till like mid-December because, well, a few things. The biggest one, I think, is because there were no chapters in this book. And that was really hard for me, especially reading on ebook. It was really hard for me to get through that without chapter markers. So I think that was probably the big thing. I don't know. Some of it was really great. Some of it missed a little bit. Not all of his humor always hit the mark, but I enjoyed it overall. And I think it's going to get better from here because I've been told that like Mort is like when he first starts really hitting his stride with his style and everything. So I'm hoping from here it gets even better. I didn't ever talk about what this is about. I just kind of assume people when it comes to Discworld. Mort is about death, who is literally death, like the personification of the abstract concept of death, takes an apprentice. And yeah, that's all I'll say about that. Next was Seasons of Albadan. Oh, you can't see that in this lighting. Which is by Alan Mush. Oh, geez. I feel like I should know how to pronounce these names. And Christopher Warman. So full disclosure before I get into this review, 2 things. 1, I won this free in a giveaway, so there's that. And 2, I know Chris. I'm always weird about calling people friends that I met online. Are we friends? Chris, are we friends? Anyway, and it was kind of weird. It was a little slow. It took a little bit to grab. Sorry, this is, I don't even know how to explain this. This reads almost like 4 short stories. It's about the world of Abaddon, or the village that's in the woods. Abaddon is the woods. And it's about these 4 seasons, and each season there's like a story. And it's a lot about the risks of progress, and specifically industrialization. It's good. But yeah, it took a little bit to grab me, to be fully transparent. It did. It took a little bit to grab me. But from chapter like 3 or 4, I think is when it starts going. Chapter 5 is woof. And from there on, it's just amazing. Of the 4, I think the second one was probably my favorite, but no, that's a lie. The last one was my favorite, but then the second one. It was just really, really good. And I say that honestly, because like I was really worried I wasn't liking this at the beginning. People were like talking about how good it was in Ridima's Discord server, and I was like, at the beginning I was like, I'm not getting it. Why do they love it so much? But I do. It's great. I would really recommend it. Plus, you know, independently published books, always good to support. Plus, look at the freaking cover on this. It's so gorgeous. So freaking gorgeous. Anyway. Moving on from there, and then I also read A Christmas Carol. I read A Christmas Carol, not necessarily every Christmas, but every like several Christmases. I like it. I like A Christmas Carol. I think it's a fun read, and so I read it. It's fine. It's not like amazing. This is the first time like I've actually thought about what I would rate it. It's not perfect, but it's just great. Like, Dickens' prose is not the best. He's long-winded, and you know what, if I was being paid by the word I would be too, and I am when I'm not. Jeez. Relatable. Anyway, that's the point. Dickens is relatable. and I just really enjoy it. I think it's a cute story. It's fun. So to move on to 5 stars, this was my only 5-star in December was Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. I loved this book. It's also not perfect, and I don't think it's one of those books that's for everyone. I loved it. I thought it was amazing. I've never felt more seen in a book, but I love it. And I'm gonna try to be brief here because last time I was telling somebody about this book, I started crying, and I'd really rather not cry on camera. But Anxious People is one of those books where what the story is about isn't really what the book's about. So the story is about a bank robber who kind of mucks up the bank robbery and ends up taking, how many people? 6 people? 7 people? Ends up taking a bunch of people that were at an apartment viewing hostage. But what the book is about those people. And it's about anxiety, and it's about depression, and it's about trauma and surviving trauma and understanding your limitations and being comfortable with not being able to save everyone. And it hurt me so bad. It had me laughing, but then it had me crying, which is somehow the worst thing ever. Like, don't make me come in here reading this book laughing at how funny it is and then leave me bawling, sobbing in a ball of tears a minute later, because I just can't. This had some of the best, most vivid and relatable descriptors of depression and anxiety that I've ever seen in a book, and it was amazing. And just, it's so clever. It's just so clever. Like I said, I don't think this is going to be for everybody, and I think it's very much going to depend on how much you relate to it. I will say this was another one. The beginning was a little rough for me. The first quarter of this, a little rough. I didn't quite get it. I didn't really get the characters. I didn't understand what was happening. But then from there on, it was so good. So circling back around to that one I skipped real quick, I'm going to show you a graph chart here. I'm going to slowly zoom out. I'm not going to let you see the labels right away. Maybe you can put your guesses down below what you think I may be showing you. Finally finished it. Die Suche nach dem Auge der Welt. Finally finished it. Part of me was thinking I would do my review of this in German, but I don't want people to think I'm stupid, and if somebody actually knows German and listens to this, they'll think I'm stupid. Promise I'm not stupid. I'm just bad at language. Anyway, I finished it. It literally took me a year and a half to finish it, which I'm definitely not going to do with the second one. So what really helped, and if you look at that chart, you'll see a big spike this summer. And what that was when I did this. I basically figured out the number of pages I would have to read per day in order to finish it before the end of the world. Feels like it sometimes. Before the end of the year. And I stuck to it. I mean, I definitely did not stay consistently to it. During finals week, the last couple weeks before winter break, I didn't read anything. But I managed to get through it. I managed to finish it. And you could see, I bet you could see on the graph the gap where it's I didn't read because finals. But then over winter break, I made up for it. And I finished it. I'm really excited. So I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm not going to do for a year. I'm going to tab it for probably the same thing, 4 pages per day. That's not a lot. And then these tabs are weekly, by the way. I did not tab every 4 pages. That's ridiculous. And I don't remember, but I believe if I stick to that, I'll be finished with this before September. So that's exciting. And with that, let's transition into stats. Okay, so moving into my general stats, I read a total of 140 books this year, or read part of 140 books this year. 5 of them were DNFs for various reasons, and then there were 3 which I still haven't finished that are going with me into 2021. One of them is this Kill the Farm Boy. The other 2 are Reverie, and then the third one is Fires of Heaven, which I'm reading with my partner. I read approximately 26,500 pages, which comes out to about 127 pages a day, which sounds less impressive, but also is a lot of pages. I think I looked it up, and that's about 2 hours worth of reading per day. And then it took me about an average of 17 days per book to finish them. I would like to get that down, but I also think that's very skewed by something like this that took me like 500 days to read. So I would like to get that down though to closer to like 14. I'd like it to be around the 2-week mark. So getting into the genres that I read, the first graph I'm going to show you here is from StoryGraph. So if you don't know, I absolutely love StoryGraph. I switched to it this summer and I am in love with it. If you've ever been in a Discord conversation and been mentioned like Goodreads and some crazy person just came in there like, have you heard of StoryGraph? That was me. That was probably me. I love StoryGraph. So this is StoryGraph's chart of my genres. Now there's one thing I do have to admit that I don't love on this, is that it's young adult is being marketed one as a genre. I think children's is in there too, but it's much lower down for me. So that really kind of skews things a little bit because I'm not sure with this graph if it's showing all of the genres for every book I read or just the first genre, and if which case that young adult is there. But fantasy overwhelmingly the highest, followed by science fiction, romance for some reason, horror, mystery, and from there it just kind of drops. So we're gonna comparing that real quick to my personal chart based on the data that I collect. This was done by, I'll insert their Discord username down here because he made it, Arkin, bless his heart. I use his spreadsheet modified a little bit for the things I actually care about. So this is my genres based on what I looked, and again, fantasy wildly, way outrageously on top. So then I took fantasy out so you can see what it looks like without the fantasy, and you see there LGBTQ plus books, which again, not really a genre, but best way to categorize it. Romance again, then science fiction, classic, contemporaries coming in after, and fiction, general fiction coming in after that. And then the next thing I'm going to show you here is a breakdown of my fantasy genres. Because I read so much fantasy, it was just interesting to me to see what kind of fantasy I read more than others. Although I'm not super happy with this graph. There's a few things I don't like about it. Big thing here, one thing is that every book was categorized as either urban or high. The way I define urban fantasy is it's fantasy that takes place on our world at some point that's recognizably our world, and high is this is not recognizable as our world. So like Middle Earth or the Wheel of Time books, those are considered high fantasy even though they are implied to be our world because they're not recognizable as our world. But like The Night Circus or Harry Potter, or I'm trying to think of like historical fantasy, those would all be considered urban even though they're not in a city setting, which I think is what a lot of people classify urban as. So anyway, point of that is every book was classified as either urban or high fantasy. Beyond that though, the subgenres got a little muddled, and I wasn't consistent in labeling them. So this isn't as useful other than it tells me that I read about twice as much high fantasy as I do urban fantasy, which doesn't surprise me. If anything, I think the urban fantasy is high because I don't tend to read urban fantasy. But that's that. So then moving on, I just wanted to quickly show you the age grouping of what age ranges. So like I mentioned above, the StoryGraph includes young adult as a genre, and I don't like that. So these are the ages that I read. Primarily adult with 77 books, followed by young adult at 40, which is higher than I would have thought. Middle grade at 14, that's got to do with rereading childhood books. And then children's has 2 books, and I'm not entirely sure what either one of them is, to be entirely honest with you. So then here's a bunch of other StoryGraph charts that I saw just to, you know, maybe encourage you to join StoryGraph so you can get cool stats like this. I'm not really sure if this is based on my personal reporting for the books that I read or if it's based on the consensus. So like if I say a book's exciting, but most people say it's mysterious, if it's gonna be ranked as exciting or mysterious. That's the only thing here I'm unsure about. I don't really have a lot to say for any of these. You know, I like adventurous, mysterious, emotional, reflective books. Don't really like relaxing or hopeful books, and somehow that doesn't surprise me. My pacing is kind of all over the place. I know I prefer faster paced books, but it's interesting to see that I read kind of from everything. Page counts, again, a little bit all over the place. A lot more or less under 300 page books than I was expecting, but I did do a lot of readathons this year and would pick out books that were shorter for those. Fiction versus nonfiction spread, one of those goals that I didn't really talk about was I'd like to get that nonfiction wedge a little bit bigger, but not too huge. Okay, so going into some numbers. So publication year, This is a graph just of when the books I read was published. Most of them were published in the 2010s. Although I do like that I have a nice spread of classics. I could probably use some more from the early 20th century, but I gotta say, I don't know if I want to read literature from the early 20th century. So that's a good spread. The 19th century category there is for 19th century or earlier, so anything before the 20th century. And then looking at page counts. So this is a nice this is my distribution of the page counts that I read. So you can see that most of the books I read are in that 300 to 399 range. There's some in the 100 to 199 range, and then from there it kind of goes down. Like I said, that 100 to 199 one is the one that really surprises me, but I think that's based on the novellas that I read for various reasons. But here's another one, because I'm weird sometimes and I like doing stats. So here's a nice box and whisker plot, because sometimes looking at the average page count isn't the most useful, but this one marks the average page count as 333 pages per book. But then you can see the median is 327, and then you got your quartiles and all that. And it's interesting that the higher ones are the ones that are outliers. I mean, obviously I expected that 1100 one to be an outlier. I'm pretty sure that's the stand, but it's interesting to look at. It's fascinating to me to look at things like that. So moving from there, we can see the number of books compared to number of pages graph that StoryGraph provides. It shows it by month, and you can just kind of look at it. It's interesting. Again, I'm mostly including StoryGraph Stats just to encourage everybody to get a StoryGraph account, because I'm loving it and I want more people on the app. Here's my chart for the number of pages I read per month. You see the same spikes. February, ridiculously high. Don't really know why that was. Maybe because it's winter and I just stayed inside. Winter in Maine, probably that. But October and November also pretty high. That was just kind of, November surprises me because that was really stressful, except I did do that readathon at the beginning. So the $1,000 readathon at the beginning of November, and that might have been why that was that. And here's the books per month, similar distribution, although October is much lower compared to the number of pages I read. So clearly read a couple big books in October. And then we're moving on to ratings. So now, ratings for me this year kind of went through a whole brouhaha. Started the year out on Goodreads, and so I was doing full star ratings mostly based on my feelings. And then I started doing the system I have now. No, what did I do first? I don't remember if I switched to StoryGraph first or switched to my new rating. StoryGraph does quarter points, so part of the reason I love StoryGraph is that they allow for quarter points, whereas, so it just kind of gives you a better understanding of range. It's just good. So that's that. So the average there of 3.6, I have an average rating of 3.6, which isn't bad. I would obviously like it to be higher, but you know, it's not bad. And that's basing it only on when I have my whole ratings in, which is what I used in my spreadsheet, because that's what I started the year out as, and I wanted to finish the year with it. You can see StoryGraph. This is the chart they give me. This includes the quarter points from when I started using StoryGraph and switched over to the quarter points. Of course, you're seeing spikes on the whole stars because when my data was imported from Goodreads, that's what it had, and I sure as heck wasn't going to go through and try to change all of those. But you still see most of them fall in that 3 to 5 range, which is just perfect. Absolutely what I want. And then I kind of wanted to do something to look at the actual ratings. So I looked at the ratings from after I switched to my new rating system. So there were 52 books that were rated within that system, which is higher than I expected. And this came out to an average of 3.9 out of 5 stars. 3.69 out of 5 stars, so a little bit higher than it was with my old system and with Goodreads, whether that's a product of using more consistent rating or if that's a product of having more range of rates, or whether that's just I started reading better things towards the second half of the year. I don't know, but again, we're nice little box and whisker plot because that's fun. So you can see the average mark there, 3.69, and then the median is 3.76, and my median's a little bit higher because you can see a couple, those lower ratings, the 1.8, 1.63, 1.3, 1.13, those are all outliers. So that's really fascinating to me to see, is that I do give low ratings occasionally, but it's generally not normal, which is good. That's what you want to see. And now I'm just going to kind of throw up some random scatter plots that I did. Honestly, none of these resulted in anything useful. I was hoping to see some sort of trend of how the things I'm comparing. So I look at page count, date published, rating, and the time it took me to read them and compared them in different combinations. I was hoping I would see some sort of trend in all of these. I really like Scatterplots, and I like seeing if there's a trend, and there isn't. There's nothing useful in any of these. I seem to have no correlation between shorter books I rate higher, or newer books I rate higher, or wow, there's sure a spike. Jessi sure loves books written in 2015, or there's nothing interesting. So that's unfortunate, but at least they look, no, they don't even look good. They look like I shot a shotgun at a grid. Anyway, that's it for this video. It was a bit of a mashup, a bit of a hodgepodge. That's the word I was looking for. These are the books, some of the books, do it this way. Some of the books that I finished in December, not all of the books. I will hopefully start having larger stacks for my physical TBR because I'd really like to start getting through those, although that's not gonna happen in January because almost none of the books on my Wadathon TBR are from my physical TBR. It's fine. It's totally fine. I hope you all have a wonderful 2021. Happy New Year. Bye.